What do we have here first? First, we have the prankster apparently pouring gasoline on the hood of the car and threatening to set the car on fire. Now, if the car is occupied and you set the car on fire, can that reasonably be perceived as an imminent deadly force threat to the people inside the vehicle? Absolutely. No question about that. Doesn't change when this gentleman steps out of his car. So now if the car is set on fire, is that still an imminent deadly force threat to this person, this gentleman, the owner of the car, presumably, or only to the vehicle? That would be the legal question. Now, remember, deadly force includes force readily capable of causing death or serious bodily injury. If there's effectively a large puddle of gasoline a couple of feet from you and it's lit on fire, can that cause serious injury? Perhaps. I don't know. That would be the question that would have to be answered. The question is, if it is capable of causing death or serious bodily injury, even in this circumstance, when the guy's no longer in the vehicle but standing beside the vehicle, is there a reasonably perceived imminent threat of serious bodily injury to him if the gasoline's lit on fire? If the answer to that is yes, then he's privileged to use deadly force in self-defense to prevent the gasoline from being ignited. What if it's not just this gentleman in the car? What if there are other people in the car and they're still in there? What if there's a child strapped into a child seat in the back of the car? So it would be cumbersome and time consuming to attempt to remove the child from the car. Again, the question is there a reasonably perceived threat of imminent death or serious bodily injury to the owner of the car or any other innocent person? If the answer to that is yes, this gentleman would be privileged in using deadly force in self-defense to prevent the gasoline from being lit. The risk, of course, is that we don't know. We don't know what the answer to that question might be, depending on the nature of the question, because it's not this gentleman's determination of that risk that actually controls his legal fate. It controls his use of force decision-making. He's got to make decisions in the moment. He's making those based on his perceptions of the threat, his reasonable perceptions of the threat. But of course, what controls his legal fate is the judgment of other people, of police who may respond to the scene, of prosecutors who read the investigative report, of judges who make decisions about what evidence may be admitted or not admitted, what law will be instructed to the jury. The jury makes the ultimate call on whether or not this man's perception of the threat was a reasonable perception. That's why there's always a risk. The moment you get involved in that confrontation, there's always a risk of being convicted because it's not your judgment that controls your legal outcome. It's the judgment of other people, maybe badly informed people, maybe politically motivated people, maybe activists. I mean, here we have, actually, it's kind of difficult to tell this guy's race, but let's presume he's white and the prankster obviously is black. Is that going to introduce a racial dynamic? Is Benjamin Crump going to show up? Is Al Sharpton going to show up, claiming that this poor kid who was just turning his life around, all he was doing, you can't kill someone for pouring water on your car? That may sound ridiculous, but if you've seen us cover any of these cases, you know those are exactly the kind of ridiculous statements that these activists in the racial grievance industrial complex make all the time. I mean, you would think with the Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely case, that Penny murdered Neely for the crime of being a Michael Jackson impersonator. Of course, that's ridiculous. But again, those are the kinds of narratives, how as ridiculous as they are, that are propagated behind these cases. So now, of course, what if we were in Texas? Texas, because we have a unique provision there for the use of deadly force in defense of property. Let's set aside the defense of persons risk. Let's presume that once this gentleman's out of his car, there's no one else inside the vehicle. Let's presume, for purposes of discussion, there's no credible, reasonable perception of an imminent deadly force threat to persons. Let's presume the only credible, reasonably perceived threat is to the vehicle. Obviously, if you set the vehicle on fire, it would harm the vehicle. Well, in Texas, of course, Texas is the only state that has a legal provision allowing prospectively for the use of deadly force in defense of personal property. And a car, an unoccupied car, is personal property.